Right. Paul, it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on the podcast again. How you doing?
Adam, it's great. I love talking with you. I'm glad I'm back on, man. This is fun.
Yeah, no, same here. It's
Yeah.
it's always good to connect with you, and we always have good chats. And I'm really grateful to have you back on. And you mentioned like you kind of want to talk about like energy
Yeah.
and just kind of go with the flow with that. So like,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, it's just when we do anything through energy, it could be negative or positive, right? Like you start something that you really, really want to do and things go awry, I think you really should look at your energy. Where's your energy towards this? Have you kind of run into a rut? Is your energy changing? Because your mind flows with whatever you're thinking about, and if you start to tailspin and start to go negative, then you flow that way. So it's very, very important that we're be aware of what we're thinking about, because if we're not aware of it, it could derail us from our goals at hand. Because when you're in the thick of things, when you have a lofty goal, things aren't going to go to plan every single minute. It's just not, because you're setting a goal that's going to be challenging. It's going to challenge your mind physically, challenge a lot of things. So it's important that we take stock in what we're thinking about and where our energy flow is. So I really wanted to dive into that because I know that that's important to you, because I've seen several of your things on Instagram and LinkedIn talking about that very subject, and it's important that we address it, because we just don't know where things are going to go, the unknown.
yeah, no, definitely, no, I really agree with you, and I think energy is a massive thing, and a lot of things are influenced, by energy, aren't they? And something just came to mind as you were speaking then about like something that happened with me this morning. I was driving to work, and we have a thing in the UK called like a mini roundabout. It's like a small roundabout,
Hmm.
and this guy, he was going too fast, so I wasn't thinking about what he was doing. He came onto the roundabout, and I had to brake as I was on the roundabout, but he was in the wrong, and my energy kind of went from shock to aggression,
Hmm.
and then I was like, I had to kind of assess what I was thinking and feeling, and I just went, just get on with it, just let go, and just
Hmm.
carry on.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what I one example of many. But in that moment, I felt fine before, and then my energy shifted based on that. But you can see how it can change so quickly, and if you're not, I mean, we're all human, we all make mistakes and do things, but if you're not conscious of that, you could probably do something you might regret, or might say something you might regret, or whatever. I could have probably made a hand sick, do you know what I mean? A
Yeah,
hand
of
signal
course.
or whatever, and then
Yeah.
it just explodes. So I think energies, you can tie that to loads of things, and I think it's so important people are mindful of that, isn't it?
Yeah, no question about it. You talked about road rage, and it's important that we do check ourselves with road rage, because you just don't know what the other person's going through. You don't know that person at all. So it's very important that you take stock into that before you do anything rash. Now, you talked about kind of being angry, and it's important that we don't bottle up, our feelings if we're angry or sad, because that's very important that we don't do that. Because what will happen is, if we bottle that up, it will just keep building and building and building, and then all of a sudden you'll pour out, and your reaction is going to be way worse than it would have been if you dealt with your feelings on a daily basis. So I think that's important to discuss, that you and I are not telling anybody to falsely be happy. We're not saying that at all, but just to kind of be aware of where our energy and our thoughts are going, because I think awareness will be that compass. It's tough though. It's tough. I've spent a day writing down all my thoughts, and then the next day kind of evaluate what I was saying. And I was quite shocked about how some negative things that I was saying. And I was like, wow, I need I'm glad I did this, because I need to be aware of these negative thoughts that I'm having, so that when they come up on a regular basis, I can say, you know what, that's just a thought. That's not going to be my reality. I'm going to change that reality. That's just a thought. And I think that's extremely important to put out there, that we need to express our feelings, but we need to express them in a healthy manner.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that's really important, and I think what you mentioned by writing things down, I think that takes quite a lot of self discipline to do that, doesn't it? And like to take that accountability and really look at, either the thoughts you're thinking, um, and really kind of what's behind that, and addressing it, isn't it? And then not holding on to things. I think sometimes, especially, I think males, we sometimes put things to the back and just get on with it and don't say things, sometimes. And then that, like you said, that bottles up. You don't know what the other person's going through, and in that situation, and plus you just take that with you, and then something else might happen, something else, and then, like you said, what was a small problem is now a big problem. Um, and yeah, I think that's so key. And I think because in society things are moving so quickly on, and people are probably more stressed now, in society based on that because so much is happening.
You mentioned something, and you're more on the pulse than I am because you're younger than me. But you talked about males and not expressing their feelings very
Yeah,
much, because that's not manly to do. But I find that we're going in the right direction that way with the younger generations. I feel like more males are being able to open up about their feelings than they did in past generations. Now, again, I'll defer to you on that, Adam, because again, you're younger than me, and you have more discussions with younger audiences. But I find that we're going in the right direction that way. I mean, I know there's a lot of stigma with younger generations, but I feel like that's always been going down ever. That's always been the case. The older generations always say, "Oh, these kids today, blah blah blah," and I think that's always going to be the way. That's always how that's going to be because people, societies are changing and they do things a different way, and it's not necessarily always right or wrong. It's just a different way of doing things due to the times, technology, and this and that. But I like to defer to you on your thoughts on especially males being able to open up a little bit more than they did in the past. Now, I hear what you're saying that we still have a lot of work to do with males opening up, but I feel like we're going in the right directions. What say you on that?
yeah. No, I think like people like in my age, and I mean I'm 27, and I think as well it depends on the person. Sometimes I'm pretty open about what's going on with me, but then again, I had past, in my past experiences, I kind of had to talk about things that were going on at that time. So I'm used to it because I did it in my past and it helped me, and I had to do that. But I think for some people, um, they're okay. They're quite open about it. People I think are kind of getting there, But I still think there's a lot going on with young people and a lot of mental health problems. I mean, especially in the UK. Um, but I sometimes think it might be down to what they've learnt from growing up, or what they've been told, like get on with it, kind of just get on with it, suck it up.
Yeah.
But I think there's kind of it's like a 50-50 almost. There's a lot of people who are open about how they are, and I think some people, I mean, I know some close friends who've been through things, and they waited right until it's like a reservoir, until that reservoir's full, and then they'll open up about it. I think a lot of people my age do that. They will wait so long until there's so much going on, and then they open up about it.
Are you 27? Are you millennial or Gen Z?
Millennial.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm millennial too, but I'm the very start
Yeah.
of the millennial. I'm like the first year of the millennial. So I have a lot of grew up with a lot of the Gen X, so I have a lot of Gen X tendencies. But I appreciate the millennial generation. I appreciate the technology. I appreciate like, how fast they are with the phone, they pop, and the pizza
Yeah.
delivery and everything like that. They're really efficient when it comes to those matters. But when you mentioned about the bucket filling up and spilling out, so to speak, I know your analogy was kind of different, but it's about the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
I feel like that's with all generations. So I feel like,
Yeah.
generations in the past, it was the same way where, you hold it in the cup and then all of a sudden it just gets too heavy and then you pour it out and you have a breakdown pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's going back to what I said before is addressing your feelings, because if you address your feelings, then you can empty it out when it's not so, when that bucket's not
Yeah.
so full,
Yeah.
right? It's just a little bit where you can address it and move on. Whereas if you keep holding it in, that's just not going to help. It's just not healthy.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a family. I think that happens a lot when you have a family and
Yeah.
you work and you don't want to show weakness because you want to make sure that you're showing a good front for your family, and you
Yeah.
want to make sure that they feel all right. But in the end, I think that's a detriment. I think that you should be able to open up to your family, especially your spouse, to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm hurting. I
Mm.
need help." And I think if you can get to that level, I think that first off, I think your relationship with your spouse will grow because you're being real with each other, and secondly, they can see some signs, like if this were to happen again, they can see signs of this happening, and maybe they can suggest something to help you through that before that bucket spills out. Because I think that's very, very important that we have somebody that we can talk to, whether that be a family member, whether that be a coach, whether that be a therapist, whoever. um, I think it's important that we have that dialogue and not suffer in silence.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think like people just need that kind of space, don't they, to kind of open up about things and then kind of process it by kind of talking about it. It kind of it's a bit like a knot, isn't it? You kind of unpick it and then it kind of through talking and then kind of analyzing it, you kind of becomes more clearer. And I think it's so important. And I think especially now, a lot more people are more open to that. And, whether that's to a coach or to a friend or someone they can trust, I think is a big thing. And like when you were talking about energy, there's so many areas we could go down with energy. Like, we're talking about aggression and people holding on to things. And like with energy, like I find it with people, like, and you probably do yourself, like you can go into a room or you meet somebody and you can just tell by their energy of how they are, you kind of pick up on that. And, whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, no question about it. And the thing about that is, you're so right. We pick up on energy within seconds of meeting somebody, and the unfortunate thing about that is maybe you're meeting somebody and they're not in the right frame of mind, and you get a negative energy vibe with that person, and then you kind of just don't connect with that person, and it could be a shame because that person could be great. They just have something weighing on their mind that's changing their energy. So it's important that we put things in perspective and we give people the benefit of the doubt, especially if we meet somebody on the first time that we don't know what they're going through, and just take that as a grain of salt. But on the same token, when you're in this situations such as, like, let's just say, like, you're in a job interview, so to speak, and things in your personal life aren't going that well, um, you have to kind of be aware of that and go, you know what? I kind of have to focus in on the present right now. I can't focus right now on what's going on in my personal life, because that might have me this job interview might affect my personal life even more. So it's
Yeah.
important that we have that perspective too when we go into a situation like that. And on top of that, we want to make sure that, when we have that poor energy, that we don't want that other person to feel it's because of that, because of them. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? They may have nothing to do with this energy. We've never met them before, but they might think, for whatever reason, maybe the shirt they're wearing, that they don't like the other person, and it has nothing to do with them. It has something to do with what happened maybe earlier in the day or something like that. So we have to be cognizant of that, when we're in those type of surroundings.
Yeah. No, I think they're really, really important points you mentioned. And I think like as well, like people like I said, people may pick up on how that person is and just associate, oh, it's me who's done that, or because I think we're constantly reading, automatically how people are in themselves, and we can sometimes think it's us that is influencing that, especially like on our job interview. And I suppose perhaps even with video calls, you can pick up on the person's energy, or if the person's not engaged, even through like a Zoom call or a phone call. It kind of interconnects into everything really, and like with like podcasting, if someone's passionate about it and they're happy doing it, you'll see that and you'll pick up on it with the other person. So energy isn't like everything, isn't it? And I think like job interviews are so important, and probably even like, would you say first dates? If you're meeting someone on a first date, they might think that you're not interested if you bring the wrong kind of energy there, and nobody wants that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about first date. I mean, but I mean, hopefully, most people are pretty
Yeah,
I think in that situation, I think they're even more conscious of their energy. Hopefully they are. If they're not, then
yeah,
maybe they should cancel the date and do it in another
yeah.
time when their energy is a little bit better. Because you obviously, when you're on a first date, you want your best foot forward in that situation. But you mentioned about podcasting, and you and I both podcast,
Yeah,
and I know you interview so many people, and I do too. And I'm sure there's been times when you're interviewing people and you're like, I got to stretch this out for 30 minutes. And I have no idea what to talk about this person because the energy is so low. I'm like, I don't know what we're going to talk about because you're not
yeah,
giving me any information. You're not giving me that energy.
yeah,
So, that's important too. So, I mean, I feel like if people are listening here that want to be guests on a podcast, you got
mm,
to bring it. You got to bring that energy, because if you don't, that host is not going to recommend you for other shows, and they're not going to bring you back. And the whole
yeah,
point of doing podcasts is getting your name out there, getting that recognition to promote whatever you're promoting, whether you're a
yeah,
coach, whether you're a personal trainer, whatever you do. That you go on these podcasts, you want to put your best foot forward, and you want to have a good rapport with the host of the show. And thankfully, you and I have a good rapport. Hopefully, I mean, I think I've been on your podcast, honored 4 or 5 times, and I think it's because we have a good flow back and forth. We have a good energy, and I think that's important for your audience to know, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that listen to you that want to do what you do. And one of the things that I tell people, because we're kind of in the same realm and coach people, similar, because I love your message, is when you want to go on, like for me, I have a goal for myself that I want to go on 2 podcasts a week of somebody else's podcast to promote what I'm doing. And that's what I tell my clients that work with me. I go, that's what you need to be in a situation where you're going on at least 2 podcasts a week and
mm,
promoting whatever you want to promote. And that's extremely important. And you're not going to be able to do that if you do not connect with with the host, and you don't put yourself out there for good content. So it's very important that you bring it. If you want to get into this world of coaching or podcasting, you have to bring the energy. Otherwise, the audience isn't going to connect with you.
mm. No, definitely. No, I really appreciate that, Paul. I really, really appreciate your support. Since we first connected, and just this whole entire journey, I'm really grateful to be your friend, and it's always great to connect with you. And I love everything that you do as well, and like the Actions and Limits podcast that you guys do. And I think you're right. You like the energy that you bring to the podcast, to the interview, to whatever you do is so key. And it's a bit like it has to be that mutual exchange. If the other person isn't bringing much, and it's like trying to lift like a kite off the ground. You have to kind of have that wind with it to pick it up. And I've experienced that sometimes, and it will only. I mean, I understand if it's a person's first podcast, fine, okay, but you have to kind of bring that energy with it, don't you? To ultimately, if you want to sell yourself, you want to promote yourself, and engage in conversation. I mean, everything's kind of energy when you think about it, and it's so key. It's really key.
Yeah, and you also want to think about, why does this host want to have me on there, right? You want to have a benefit for that host to have you on there. They're not going to just have you on there. There could be people that are nice and bring people on to help promote.
Yeah.
But more than that, they're trying to do a podcast and they're trying to grow their audience. So they want to bring in guests that are going to be engaging and connect. And so you really want to think about that as a guest. Like, how am I going to be able to connect with the host? How am I going to connect with the guest? And how am I going to be able to help grow their audience? Because it's important that we raise the tides for everybody. Everybody wins. It's all about abundance.
Yeah.
I don't see you as a competitor at all, Adam. I see you as a coworker, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, when
Yeah.
you get a client or you do something great, I want to celebrate you because you're a great coach and you are great at what you do. And your style is similar to me, but we have differences, and
Yeah.
there might be people that connect with you just because of your personality over me, and vice versa. There might be people that would connect with me because of my personality, just because people are different. I mean, you're
Yeah.
younger than me, so there might be a different a connection that you might have with people in their early 20s, that it hasn't been that long since you were in your early 20s, and you can relate to what they're going through, just getting out of college or university and trying to find that first job and the stress of that, and
Mm.
and different organizations. I remember when I got out of university or college, and every place would be like, well, we want experience. And I'm thinking to myself, how can I get experience if you won't give me a shot? I need a shot before I can get experience. So, I think that that's something, a frustration to people coming out of college or university. They're like, I need experience. I can't get that
Yeah.
experience if you're not going to give me a shot.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's so true, isn't it? And I think people appeal to different people, and that's okay. And I think, like, especially coming out of university or education or trying to find your way in life is difficult. And I think, like, a lot of places, like they want experience, kind of, quote unquote, but then you need that opportunity to have it, to get that experience. And I think that's something that I've definitely found, through my life experience so far, trying to apply for jobs, trying to get positions. And I've lost count of how many rejections or no responses I've got, or things not work out. And like I was telling you before we started, I had a position offered to me, and, like, 6 months went by, and there was no commencement yet, and it was just kind of this limbo period. And then trying to apply for other positions, and it's people don't always see, do they, what it's a bit like an iceberg. People don't see what you've been through or what you had to kind of go through to kind of get that position or whatever. I think there's a lot of that behind the surface. Some people don't go through that and they're lucky, but I think for the majority of people, you have to kind of have those rejections and have no's, and people say they want experience, but you just need someone to give you that opportunity, don't you, to, I suppose, jump into something.
Yeah, I think that twofold. First things that you need to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and ask. I want the job. So often then we get in this humble mode
Yeah.
where we don't want to go out and ask for it, and we go, no, ask for it, go for it. The worst that can happen is they're going to say no, and you just say, okay, we move on. The best thing that you can hear is a few no's, because then it doesn't affect you the same way. Is,
Yeah.
okay, I got to know, whatever, move on. Especially if you want to get into the entrepreneur world, you're going to hear way, 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 way more no's than yeses. And you got to be okay with the no's. I understand that it's uncomfortable hearing no's, and, you know, you never always want to hear a no, but if you can allow that to not affect you and go move on and say, you know what, we can part ways. And, you know, hopefully I gave you some value, you know, too bad it didn't work out, but I, you know, I gave it a shot and it didn't work out, but I keep moving forward and I keep grinding it, because eventually you're going to get yeses. And the more you get the no's, the better you're going to be at presenting your case, your product, whatever you're doing. But if you're just timid and you don't want to get into that realm and you don't want to make yourself uncomfortable, it's going to be a long road. And that, again, that also goes into the business world. If you don't want to be an entrepreneur, you want to work at an employer, you got to put yourself out there in the same manner. And, you know, there's going to be people that are going to tell you, you know what, you don't have enough experience. You're not this, you're not that. And you can't just crumble on that. Maybe it's criticism that you can grow from and go, thank you for giving me that criticism. I'll work on these attributes and I'll sharpen my knife so that the next interview I don't have those issues. Rather than get defensive and say, oh, blah, 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 that's not me, this and that. Sometimes it's really good to be reflective and go, wait, you know what, maybe I do need to change some things. Maybe I do need to look outside of the box a little bit about me and how other people see myself, other than how I see myself, as opposed to how other people see themselves.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love that. And I really, I agree with everything you said. And I think people, like I said, in situations sometimes point the finger and don't take responsibility. And they're like, oh, no, it's not me, it's XYZ, and don't look at it. And I think there's a lot of growth to be taken from jumping into the unknown and, that rejection and going through that. It's almost like you said, like sharpening a sword almost. It's, each time you get a no, and it's painful, but it's like you said, you kind of build those kind of calluses to it. And, it's a decision to jump into entrepreneurship or into business or, out, to go out your comfort zone, isn't it? And I think there's so much growth and learning to be taken from, those experiences. And I think, everyone should act on doing that if it's something they want to do, and it's kind of part of the process, isn't it? It's kind of part of the process. And I think about, with podcasting and asking people to be on the podcast and, still get no's, and you have to, like I said, be okay with it. And it's just not meant to be. And it is what it is.
So often in my life where I felt uncomfortable and had that tickle in the belly and still lean into it, whether it was a yes or no afterward, I feel good about myself. You know why? Because I pushed myself past that tickle in the belly. I do meetup groups, and I sometimes I feel like an 8-year-old boy worried that that nobody's going to show up to my birthday party. So I have that little anxiety before I go on the Zoom call, like, oh crap, am I going to be the only one on this meetup group? And that's never been the case, but you always have that insecure feeling about it. And, I say to myself, well, whatever, even if it's one person, we're going to have a good meetup. We're going to talk. And we're going to get through some things. It's going to be great. Even if it's just one person. Because it's just, we got to take that sting out of it. I don't know if you're familiar with, he's a US singer. He's a bit older, Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah. I love Bruce Springsteen.
Okay. He has this thing that he says before he gets on stage, his stomach's in knots, he can't feel his legs, and his hands are numb. And you know what he says to himself? He goes, that means I'm ready to go out on stage. He's leaning into that fear. And I think that's what we all need to do. We all are human beings, and we all have that anxiety, whatever that is for that person. It's different from people to people, but we all have that feeling. And sometimes we need to lean into that feeling. And once we lean into that feeling, we can look back and go, oh, I'm so glad I did that. I feel so good about myself that I was able to lean into that feeling, and that I didn't back away. I wanted to back away because I was so nervous
Yeah.
about it, but I didn't do it. I overcame that feeling, and I had a great presentation or job interview, or ask that person out on a date, or whatever it is for that person. They overcame that tickle in the belly, and
Mm.
there's nothing better than that, than overcoming that feeling.
Yeah. No, I really like what you said there, and about leaning into it, and the meetups that you do, and even if it's like one person, it's not really how many, but it's like who, isn't it? And
Mhm.
it's pushing, following through, even though part of your body or your mind or your energy is saying no, or a bit on the back foot, following through and doing it anyway, and
Mhm.
having that, feeling that benefit afterwards. I think that's really admirable and inspirational, and I think like that's, like you said, what we should all do if we're presented with those feelings. And I remember when I had a main part when this is back in, would you call it kindergarten or primary school in the UK,
Mhm.
um having like a main role as I played Rooster in the Annie musical, and I remember
All
going on
right.
stage and having those feelings of like stage fright, but you know kind of having to do it anyway because everyone's waiting outside. And you feel better once you've done it. I mean, that's one example, but it's you otherwise it's that great, isn't it? And I think then people might beat themselves up because they didn't do XYZ, or what if. I think what if is far worse than kind of like I did it and I tried kind of thing, like you said.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah, that regret is way worse than going after and failing. And you mentioned the meetups, and most of the time when I have meetups, I have good responses. I've got a lot of good attendance on it, and a lot of people like it, and they have a good feedback. But you still, even though when you do a new meetup, you still have that fear. And I
Yeah,
think that's with any celebrity or guru. I think everybody has those feelings. Everybody
yeah,
is insecure. There's never, you're never, I I hate these videos where they'll talk about when they had the struggle, and now they're a robot and they don't have these feelings anymore, and they're this and that. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Come on,
yeah,
man. You're still a human being. I get it. You overcome a lot of stuff and you learned a lot of stuff, and you process your feelings differently, but you're still a human being.
yeah,
You still get scared, you still get angry, you still get sad. So talk to us like you're still a human being, and not this invincible robot now that that got to this level of
yeah.
you know
Of like Hercules.
perfection. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think it makes me think about, like you said, that feeling of like fear or anxiety or around the unknown. I sometimes get it when I go on other people's shows or
Hmm.
podcasts or live streams, um, because I'm like, it's a bit like that spotlight kind of feeling again. It's like I'm on, I've it's yeah, it's like going on stage. I get it going on other people's shows now. Even though I've done lots of podcasts and I do videos and stuff, I sometimes still get that feeling of like, it's like, I don't know if it's fear or excitement. It's kind of the same thing, going on someone else's, but you kind of follow through with it.
Yeah, because you want to do a good job. You want to have your point come across how you want it to come across, and you want the host to like you, and you want the audience of that podcast to like you or connect with you. So yeah, you do have those thoughts or those
Mm.
fears. But I think that once you're in the throes of things, once you're in the
Yeah.
podcast itself, I think those fears kind of go away. And especially if you're on a podcast like your podcast, where we're kind of just in a flow. We're just kind of having a conversation, and we're not really
Yeah.
worried about, oh, what does this people think about what we're saying. Is I think that we're having a legitimate conversation that we both
Yeah.
really like to talk about these things. And I think people can hear and see our energy, and because of them hearing and seeing our energy, they can say, okay, these two are being authentic, and I can connect with them.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what people like, isn't it? And I think that's what I like anyway as well. Like seeing that genuine conversation, between a couple of people or however many, and seeing that passion and that care. And I think if it's too clunky or it's too, what's the word? Kind of organized or scripted to, it doesn't seem real. People want to see real, genuine conversations, and that kind of ties into energy again, doesn't it? When you think about it, like, where we're talking from different parts of the world, and on a Zoom call, when we have all this energy, being exchanged, so it ties into so much. Trying to think, is there any other areas you think about energy or anything that comes to mind?
Well, one of the things I wanted to mention that you brought up about going on a podcast and sometimes making it feel like it's not very authentic. And I'll go on podcasts because I go on quite a bit, as we talked about, and they'll have these questions. They'll say, oh, I have these 10 questions that I'm ready to prepare to send you. And my response always to that is, that's awesome. Thank you for sending me these questions. That's cool. But feel free to go off script. Feel free to ask me a question on what I just said. Because I feel like if you're actively listening to the conversation that we're having with each other, that's going to be far greater than the 10 questions that you have. Obviously, you may have some questions that because the guests that you're having, and you want that a question to be asked because it goes to what the guest does, and you want to make sure you get that out. I hear that, and I have that in my head as well. But I think it's also important that you go off script a little bit and go off of what the guest is saying to you, because I think that brings in a more authentic conversation. And again, that goes back to what we're talking about, that energy.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a really great point, and I think that's something I've learned through podcasting. I think when I first started, I used to kind of overthink things, and I would have the guests, and I remember writing loads of bits on a piece of paper, and I remember just overthinking it. And I think it's more natural when you go with the flow. But you can incorporate questions into the podcast. The way I do mine, as I'll ask favorite books or role models or things like that alongside the conversation. I think that flows really well. But I think also by going away from the normal questions, you might open up something by asking a question that has got nothing to do with with the current ones that you usually ask. They might kind of touch on something which opens up a great moment or conversation.
One of my favorite things when I'm interviewing somebody, and it doesn't happen every time, but it happens, from time to time, that the guest says, wow, I've never been asked that question before. And I feel good. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting into the psyche, into the soul, that I'm asking a question that hasn't been asked before, but it's relevant to what they're talking about. And a lot of those questions come from actively listening to the guest, and having a question of just curiosity. I mean, you look at, I know you listen to Joe Rogan, and one of the things that he always talks about is curiosity. He says the reason why my podcast works is because I'm a curious person, and that comes across in the interview, because he asks good questions because he's curious. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with the energy and the flow of the conversation he's having with the guest. And it's not because he's going to question, okay, now I'm going to ask question 3. It's coming from what the conversation he's already having with the guest.
No, that's another great point. And I was listening to him on the way back from work today, and he is very curious. And I really look up to him, for what he does. And I think that's something that shines through, and that's what opens up the conversation, isn't it? If you're constantly going back to question 6 or whatever, then you're only going to get question 6. You're not going to get, all the other things. No, definitely. But yeah, it's always a pleasure to connect with you, Paul, and to have you on the podcast. And I love all that you do. I'm really grateful to have you as a friend. I'm really great to have you on my podcast again. And I always appreciate you supporting me and all that I do. And yeah, it really means a lot. And where can people find you and your content? Anything that's going on with you?
Adam, it's always great connecting with you because I see you on a daily basis, with your Instagram, your LinkedIn, and the videos you do and the podcast. You're a machine, man. I respect the content that you throw out because you're working your butt off, and I see it through the work that you're doing, and it's great. I know that we kind of talk here and there through Instagram, LinkedIn, but it's great to every now and again get on a podcast together and really connect because you're doing great things, man. And I just can't wait to see the growth that's going to happen with you because you're going to be blowing up very, very soon. And you don't want to forget the little people like me, Adam. You want to make sure, hey, throw me, when you're on big stage, goes, oh, you know what, Paul, man, yeah, you just throw my podcast every now and again. But in all seriousness, thank you for the platform. And the way to get in touch with me, easiest way to get in touch with me is through my website, a call to action.coach. And I have a free guide on my website on how you can rewrite your story and how I was able to rewrite my story and how you can maximize your day. And I also have a Facebook group called Rewrite Your Story, where people from all over the world come together, share their stories, and we give them support with no judgment. And I mentioned it a little bit in the podcast that I do meetup groups within the group. We write your story, and we come together for an hour, and we just kind of discuss a topic and how we get over these topics. And again, you can express yourself without any judgment. We're only on the group to support you. So that's Rewrite Your Story Facebook group. And then you can get to know my bio a little bit. I mean, I've discussed my bio with Adam several times, so that we didn't need to go over it here before, but you can get into my bio and know my background and why I am who I am.
No, I love it. And, thank you, Paul, really, really from the bottom of my heart. Like, I really, really appreciate it. And, I really appreciate your kindness and, everything you mentioned, really touched. And, I'm just so grateful, for everything. And, I love that all that you're doing as well. It really means a lot. And, yeah, no, I'll definitely have to join you on one of those rewrite your story sessions sometime as well. And, keep up the awesome work on your side as well.
I appreciate it, Adam. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, take care.